Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Peter Salerno. I'm a doctor of psychology, a retired psychotherapist, and a personality disorder specialist. Today, we're diving into a concept that can take a simple disagreement and turn it into an exhausting, all out moral battle: self-righteous justification. In this video, I'm going to break down what it is and why it's common in cluster B personalities, the psychological functions it serves, some of the exact phrases you'll hear, how it plays out in real life and why it's so destructive, and finally, what you can do to protect yourself when you see it. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you've just been accused, judged, and put on trial simply for having a different opinion, this video is for you. Self-righteous justification, especially in the context of cluster B personalities, is when someone frames their stance, behavior, or reaction as morally superior, objectively correct, and beyond reproach, while dismissing opposing perspectives as invalid, ignorant, or even malicious. This is not the same thing as simply being confident in your opinion. It's not, I believe I'm right. It's, I am right. And if you disagree with me, that means you're wrong, immoral, and dangerous. Once that moral framing is in place on the part of the cluster B personality, dialogue pretty much becomes impossible. Cluster B personalities share overlapping pathological personality traits, including emotional intensity and instability, black and white thinking, a high need for control over perception, a rigid, inflexible perspective, antagonism, disagreeableness, hostility, manipulativeness, provocation, rudeness, grandiosity, and perseveration, among other traits. When disagreement occurs, it's not often experienced as a difference of opinion, but as a personal attack, a perceived threat to their identity or their status. Because they refuse to admit they're wrong, they confront these circumstances by taking the moral high ground. They become the virtuous one, and you become the flawed one, by recasting the other person as defective, morally, intellectually, and emotionally, and by rewriting the conflict. It's no longer about the topic, it's about defending truth or what's right, according to their idea of what's true and what's right. This protects their image, allows them to avoid accountability, and secures control over the narrative. Self-righteous justification is not random. It serves specific psychological functions for the cluster B personality. First, it serves self-protection. It preserves self-image as right, virtuous, and justified. It reframes the disagreements as right versus wrong in order for them to avoid any self-reflection. The second psychological purpose is defensive aggression. They treat disagreements as personal attacks, and they justify their hostility and their retaliation as simply defending the truth. The third psychological function is narrative control. This casts them as the principled hero or the persecuted victim. They also maintain dominance in the social narrative, and it also garners outside validation. The fourth psychological function is resistance to accountability. The moral high ground makes it harder for others to challenge them, and it allows them to refuse apologies or change, even with clear evidence. Here are 6 examples of common self-righteous justification phrases and what they really mean. The first has to do with moral high ground framing. They might say something like, I'm just speaking my truth and standing up for what's right. And if you disagree, that says more about your morals than mine. So this shifts the conflict from differing opinions to directly judging your character. The second example is related to absolute certainty. They might say something like, this is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact, and I won't waste my time explaining something so obvious. Basically, this frames any other perspective as ignorance, and it has that antagonistic bite to it. The third example comes from victim-hero positioning. They might say something like, people like me get attacked for telling the truth, and you can't handle it. This paints them as the brave, virtuous truth teller, and you as the oppressor. The fourth example is related to deflection by virtue. Essentially, they might say something, along the lines of, I'm a good person, so how dare you question me? This is really just a shield against any criticism that they don't want. A fifth example of this is pathologizing the other person. They might say something like, the fact that you even think this way shows that you're damaged or broken or immoral and that you can't see reality. This undermines your mental and emotional and intellectual capacity instead of addressing the point of the dialogue. And then another example of this is related to conditional worth. Essentially, they might say something along the lines of, if you really were a decent person, you would see it my way and validate me. This essentially links your moral value to agreeing with them. Here's where it gets darker. Self-righteous justification is really not a defense mechanism. It's a weapon. This is where the cluster B personality can frame their cruelty as a good cause. The mentality is, I'm justified in burning you down because I'm fighting for what's right. In practice, they actually want to hurt you badly because they can't tolerate losing control. They want to be painted as the victim, but even if they've had a hard life, that doesn't excuse harming others. Adults take responsibility. They don't weaponize their wounds. When you recognize self-righteous justification, you need a plan. Don't take the bait. You can't win a moral high ground fight with facts. Set boundaries early. End the conversation the moment it becomes personal or hostile. Don't feed their frame. Refuse to argue on their moral terms. Know when to walk away or stop the conversation if it's occurring through text or over the phone or online. Your mental health is more important than winning the point. Self-righteous justification turns healthy disagreement into a power struggle, where one side is always the hero and the other side is always the villain. While this is most common in cluster B personalities, recognizing it isn't really about diagnosing people, it's about protecting your peace. If you've experienced this dynamic, then you know that it's exhausting. To avoid that exhaustion and get relief, relief comes from stepping back, refusing to play the part that the cluster B personality has written for you, and reclaim your own narrative. I'm Dr. Peter Salerno. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.